For this project, I've chosen a subject client that is a John Doe, and the question is whether the prescription of a paleo diet is an adequate one for his performance. It's an interesting question, John. The concept of a paleo diet is a popular and interesting one. The first thing I explain to you is that as a personal trainer and performance coach, I'm not allowed to prescribe you a diet. However, it's well within my scope of practice to give you good, sound nutritional advice. In order to better do this, can you give me a little bit of background on your knowledge of nutrition and macronutrients? My client responds with a traditional Western diet response of nutritional needs: grains, dairy, fruits and vegetables, and meats. Those are all great, John. I'm a big fan of a lot of the nutritional concepts proposed by our federal resources, such as Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics or the USDA's myfoodplate.gov. In order to better understand nutrition, though, let's discuss some of the basic nutritional concepts outlined on a couple of these websites. Nutritional concepts in America tend to be very misleading because they follow the old pyramid model and the current MyFoodPlate model. I support these well-balanced diets, but they don't really do a good job of educating the American consumer on what really good nutrition is. So let's get into this a little bit more. Let's start off with macronutrients, John. The body has three different macronutrients that it needs. It's fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. If we take a look at this diagram that I have right here, we can see how some of these categories overlap. The important thing to note here, John, is that if we look at the food plate diagram from the USDA, we don't see the same nutrient breakdown in the three macronutrient groups. But we can now categorize some of these proposed foods. For example, vegetables can fall into two different groups, but depending on the vegetable, there is great variety in the amount of macronutrients it contains. Let's take broccoli, for example. I know I feel like I'm losing you and getting away from your initial paleo diet question, but what we did with broccoli is break down its nutrient density. Better understand whether a paleo diet is right for you, need to understand what nutrient density actually means. Keeping the nutrient breakdown of broccoli in mind, let's take a look at what 1 cup of cooked green peppers gives us using the USDA's nutrient database again. If we look here, we have just over 1 gram of protein, 9 grams of carbohydrates, and less than 1 gram of fat. So we can now see that if we compare the two, that broccoli is nutrient-dense food, and therefore it packs in or gives you a lot more nutrients per serving. This is the definition of nutrient density. The paleo diet has got a lot to do with nutrient density, and it's the reason it's gained a lot of popularity and traction. In 1985, Eaton and Connor presented research on diets of hunter-gatherers of the Paleolithic era. The idea is that the diets of that era were very different, and our bodies haven't evolved as fast as nutrition has and through our times. According to Eaton and Connor, macronutrient breakdown was 21%, 35%, and 45% for fats, protein, and carbohydrates, respectively. Some would coin Leslie Cordain, Dr. Leslie Cordain, as the father of the paleo diet. In 2000, Cordain and his colleagues expanded on Eaton and Connor's research, explaining there was greater variance than for these percentages, given that the diets would alter within regions of the hunter-gatherer groups based on food availability. According to Cordain and his colleagues, fat percentages would be comparable to those of today's Western diet, but the sources would be considerably different. In addition, Eaton and Connor explained in their 1985 research that diets of Paleolithic era contain no dairy, no grains, processed grains, meaning the elimination of many food items that contain wheat, or all food items that contain wheat or rice, which is the bulk of today's Western diet carbohydrate resources. Given elimination of these grains, we're left with, for carbohydrate resource, we're left with a lot of fruits and vegetables. And certainly these are more nutrient dense than grains. And so you can kind of see how the relevance of nutrient density applies, and why it's applicable for the understanding of nutrient density in the paleo diet and whether it's right for you. A lot more research has been done over the years for the Paleolithic diet, basically kind of adding to the variability of different percentages, macronutrient percentages, but the premise of the paleo diet remains the same. Things to consider that are outlined by Cordain and his colleagues in a 2000 research was that meats were more lean because they were wild, and fruits and vegetables were more nutrient dense because it was wild fruits and vegetables as well. And basically, all these foods are more nutrient dense than the mass produced foods today. So there's a lot of evidence that supports the benefits of Paleolithic diet. For example, in 2009, Frazzetto and his colleagues found decreases in cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood sugar in only 17 days of shifting to the paleo diet. A similar short-term study was done subject over 3 weeks in 2008 by Osterdahl and his colleagues, which resulted in similar decreases in weight, body mass index, and blood pressure, all of which are benefits to reduction of cardiovascular disease. John, I think there's a lot of support behind the paleo diet. I myself actually followed the paleo diet for a project for a month, and my blood pressure dropped progressively each week for 4 weeks straight. It's possible that those results were strictly from the elimination of added sugars and processed foods, and that's why I think it's important for you to really understand what good nutrition is, nutrient quality, and have a better understanding of what macronutrients are. Things to consider are whether you need to follow a specific diet or strictly eliminate processed foods and less healthy foods in lieu of more nutrient-dense foods. In terms of performance, John, I think there's a great variability between people and their responses to diets and different nutritional patterns. And because of that, you'll need to see how your body adapts to any changes in your diet. I'm going to give you this article by Dr. Berardi that he wrote in 2016, found on the NSCA's website, and that talks a little more about the variability between different popular diets and how everyone responds to them differently, which supports my point as well. In this article, Berardi reiterates a lot of what I explained to you regarding the importance of understanding good nutrition rather than just accepting a diet as doctrine. So to answer your question directly, John, it's outside of my scope of practice to tell you specifically you should switch to a paleo diet. However, I think if you do a little more research on the paleo diet, you can incorporate some of these meals into your diet while ensuring that you're meeting all of your body's needed macronutrients. It's a good way to increase nutrient density in your meals, and you'll likely see an improvement in body composition, health, and performance. Once you do a little bit more research on the paleo diet, if you want to completely eliminate grains and dairy and make the complete shift, let me know, and we can get on the Eat Right website, American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Association's website, and I can recommend a registered dietitian to ensure you're getting more professional knowledge on adequate nutrient intake.